Heyo, what's good guys? Welcome to Anime Empire. Today's episode will be about Ningen Fushin, or Disillusioned Adventures. Before we get to the show, do subscribe to Annie Recapped if you want to find more amazing animes from all over the world to watch. Now let's get right into it. Danger and possibility abound in this place known as the Labyrinth City, and men and women from across the world risk their lives here to make a living. Our protagonist is Nick, a monster slayer with the Masters of War, a gang of skillful adventurers. Nick also has a girlfriend, and his long-term ambition is to make Masters of War into an A-rank adventurer party. But his dream is shattered when the party leader, Argus, tells him they no longer need him in their group. Additionally, his girlfriend breaks up with him and he becomes an idle otaku to cope with everything. While sitting in the rain with sorrow on his face, he reminisces about the time he was kicked out. In a flashback, Argus reminds him that he took Nick as a youngster, but now he's attempting to issue orders around here, which he opposes. He dislikes Nick's method of doing things and urges him to find a more suitable setting now that he is no longer a child. He is devastated since he looked up to him as a father figure and is drenched in the rain. A woman approaches to check up on him and asks him the reason for his sorrow. Nick asks him why she is talking to him, and she states that as an idol, it's her job to cheer people up. With that, she hands him a ticket to his concert and an umbrella and runs off in the rain. Later, Nick attends the show and returns happy after buying loads of accessories from the merch store. The next day, he visits a newbie adventurers guild to make up the money he spent yesterday, but he is unable to find a suitable team to go on adventures. He enters the pub just outside the guild and sits at a table alone to reconsider his life choices. Just then, a party of 3 joins him at his table, and he notices one of them wearing an old and expensive looking jewel. Even her clothing is one of the finest quality, and she most likely belongs to a royal family. The second member is a cleric who was already drunk when he arrived, and Nick scents a specific fragrance on him, which tells him he just left a cabaret club. He has no medals on his clothing, meaning he was excommunicated. The third member seems to be a Dragonian, whose worn-out attire indicates that she has experienced many battles, but she has the demeanor of a wounded beast. The beverages are served, and it is a lonely and depressing scene at the table as all 4 attendees struggle. They chug their drinks at the same time, and all 4 of them simultaneously yell out that they can't trust anyone. This sparks a similarity between the 4, and we are taken into a flashback of the rich woman, who is a trainee mage in a magic school. Her name is Tiana, and her master is proud of her for mastering multiple forms of magic at such a young age. She believes that magic is not just a tool to make one's life easier. Instead, it contains knowledge about the world around them. She enters a cafe and crashes into her fiancé, Alex, who is sitting beside another woman. She sits next to them, and he asks him if she managed to impress her teachers today. With enthusiasm, she says her teachers loved her lightning magic and that she can graduate a year early at her current pace. She is introduced to the woman beside Alex, Lynn, the Delcott family's eldest daughter. Alex says he has heard rumors of Tiana bullying Lynn at the school and that she has bribed the teachers to get higher grades in her magic classes. Tiana refuses all such accusations, but Alex is frustrated at her and rants out horrible things. He says he is humiliated being with her as she has become the top student and decides to break the engagement with her. Tiana is heartbroken and moves out to live in a town where she is unable to find a job as people think a noblewoman wouldn't last in harsh environments. Unsure of what to do, she gambles money on a race and wins. However, it is not long before she loses and is left with no money. She tries to join an adventurers guild, but anyone approaching her runs away because she has no will to greet someone with a smile. The flashback ends, and now it's the cleric's turn to tell the tale of his misery. He says that his city is well known for its medical facilities and a temple of divine inspiration. His name is Zem, and he used to be a cleric at the temple. Miral, a young woman, would collect medicinal grass for him for her daily expenses. One night, she asks if she can date Zem, who refuses because she is too young and also because he works in a temple. She runs off in anger and decides to punish Zem for rejecting her. The next day, a few officers approaches a boat, and it turns out that Miral has accused Zem of assaulting her. He is locked behind bars for 3 months before being banished from his town. Despite his innocence, no one believed him, and everyone gazed at him contemptuously. Later, he comes across a woman who believes in his innocence and spends the night with her. The next day, she advises him to join an adventurers guild and live his life to the fullest. At the pub, Nick says these are mere stories told over a jug of beer, and that he will probably never see these people again. Zem reveals his plans to go after the Demon King after this, and Nick asks the Dragonian girl, Curran, what her side of the story is. She hesitantly tells them that something important was stolen from her, and that the person who stole it was the most important person in her life. The next day, Nick wakes up to all three of them knocked out cold in Tiana's apartment, who kicks them out of it. Just then, Nick yells out that they won't survive one day if they split up, and proposes that they team up. They all gather in a motel to rent a room, and the owner recognizes Nick from Masters of War. She also recognizes Curran and says she is pretty famous for surviving a C-rank labyrinth alone. The woman asks them what the name of their party is, and Nick says that they are the survivors, because they have survived the horrors of the world. Nick proposes 3 laws that the group must follow at night as disillusioned adventurers. The first is not interfering with other people's hobbies. The second is safekeeping the money. And the third one is the most genius, staying alive. The next day, they visit a G-rank dungeon named the Sticky Aqueduct, since they aren't allowed to enter higher labyrinths at the moment. They need to defeat the bosses of 2 G-rank dungeons to get promoted to F-rank. Inside, Nick tells them these labyrinths won't be difficult as they are practice areas for newbies. Zem and Tiana have no prior combat experience, but he tells them they shouldn't worry as no one gets killed here. Later, Zem says that even though slimes are monsters, it feels wrong to take the lives of living creatures. Nick says that if they don't do it, normal plants and animals will become monsters too, and Tiana says that it is necessary so that the labyrinths don't grow bigger. He asks her why the monsters attack them in the first place, and she tells him that all monsters do so regardless of their type, so they must fight them for survival. When Nick advises them to keep their guard up, Tiana boasts that she has defeated orcs and goblins, so slimes aren't an issue. Just then, a slime shoots a sticky fluid at her face, and she falls by stepping on one of them. She gets up and apologizes for getting careless, but states that she will get the slimes back for attacking her. She carelessly uses her magic, but accidentally aims it at Curran, who, with her quick reflexes, deflects it using her sword. Tiana approaches her and tells her it was a mistake, but she furiously tells her to watch herself. This causes a disturbance among the group as they proceed further into the dungeon. They reach the top floor and see a large purple slime, the boss of this labyrinth. Tiana runs in and uses her ice spear to pierce through the slime, making it explode at the spot. Later, they all wash off the goo at a nearby lake, and Nick says that slimes react to powerful magic by exploding themselves, followed by Tiana getting up and apologizing to Curran. Tiana reveals that her strongest magic is wind and water, but she is helpless against fire and close-range attacks, both of which are strong suits of Curran. They both settle their differences then and there, and the group is back to being united. Later, they enter a goblin forest as their last G-rank dungeon, and Nick tells them goblins are weak individually, but their strength lies in working as a pact. They also have a degree of intelligence so they can communicate with each other and organize attacks. After Nick clears out the initial wave, Tiana uses detection magic to spot more goblins in hiding and guides them to the next wave. The group is surprised at Tiana's abilities, who in turn says she doesn't trust Nick since he never told them he could fight so viciously. Just then, Tiana notices something with a much higher magic presence than a mere goblin, and Nick reveals that it could be an ogre. Ogres are evolved versions of goblins that possess greater strength, and even Nick himself can't take them alone. Nick says they can't retreat or else the ogre will attack the nearby people, and they could use the money they get by slaying one. Ogres are highly resistant to magic, so they plan to use Tiana as a decoy while Nick and Curran ambush it. On the way, Curran says that she doesn't fully trust Tiana either, even when she wants to, and she tells her not to worry as it is the same for the rest of them. When they approach the ogre, Tiana asks Curran to march head on. As she charges, she decides not to look back and fully trust Tiana, who uses her ice magic to get rid of any goblins who approach Curran. As she reaches the ogre, she uses her flame ability and strikes it with all her strength, turning it into ashes and dust. While collecting their horns, Nick accidentally falls on Curran and breaks her amulet. Curran is knocked out in a dungeon in a reminiscence, and when she awakes, she is carrying the same amulet. One time she wanders into a marketplace, where she notices a jewel store and stops by it. She chooses an amulet, and the storekeeper informs her that it will cost 20,000 dinar, which she cannot afford at present. As she leaves it behind, the storekeeper stops her and says that her nails have left a mark on the pendant, and he cannot sell it anymore. The shopkeeper persists her to buy it at half price, but just then, her acquaintance Kalius appears and snatches it away from him. He asks Curran to scratch the pendant, and it turns out that the scratch it had earlier is too shallow for it to be made by her, so Callias confronts him for it. Callias pulls out the exact same pendant from the shopkeeper's coat, revealing that he switched it with a damaged one to persist her into buying it. He asks Curran if she still wants the pendant, and she replies in affirmation. Callias takes it from the shopkeeper for the price of not turning him in, and hands over the pendant to Curran. Dragonians are a proud race, and their destiny is to serve a human who will become a hero and save the world. Curran stuck by Callias' side because she thought he would become the hero his race was looking for. One day, as she packs her stuff to go on a raid, Callias arrives and tells her to leave it all here as no one would dare steal from her. She goes on a dungeon raid with Callias and his party, where she takes on a scorpion monster and kills it easily. The group moves forward in the dungeon to face a potted snake, and Callias reveals that magic won't work on the snake if it hides in its pot. So Curran must attack the pot to make it come out. He says that the rest will cover fire once the snake comes out, and she marches on to launch the attack. As she smashes the pot, a purple snake comes out, and the rest of the squad joins in to assist her. Callias tells her to keep it occupied as he prepares for the killing blow, but before he can do so, the snake exhales a toxic gas that renders Curran immobile. As she falls unconscious, Callias explains how the poisonous gas is a last resort for the snake, and it becomes very weak after using it. Curran was used as bait to kill the snake, and after obtaining its flesh, they left her there paralyzed to die on her own. Later, as she gathers her strength and returns to the motel, she recalls how she had left the Dragon Knight's jewel with her stuff. The jewel was fashioned with the finest materials and was infused with magic by her elder, who had handed it to her for safekeeping. She returns to the motel, and people are surprised to see her alive. Callias convinced them she died in the dungeon and grabbed her belongings, promising to deliver them to her family. She drops to her knees in the rain, realizing she has been deceived by the man she trusted more than any other. She spends the following few days seeking Callias, but her search delivers no results. As she wonders what to do next, a strange man goes by her while she stands in front of a cafe, and the locals divulge that he is Fifths. Fifths was a popular topic among the locals, and the guy was so powerful that he was permitted to enter Labyrinth solo. His registered party name was the Solo Eater, and people addressed him as Fifths, the Solo Eater. Curran began following him everywhere to be like him, and he immediately caught on but played clueless to see where it led. One day in a cafe, a drunken man stumbles into Fifth's sword, but Curran uses her tail to prevent it from falling. He states that the blade is his life and thanks Curran for saving it. As he leaves the cafe, Curran thanks him for teaching her how to enjoy good food. That was the last time she saw him, but rumors say he is still out there fighting the labyrinths alone. Being betrayed gaped a hole in Curran's heart, and delicious food did a good job filling it back up. However, doing so left her with no money, and she decided to raid dungeons for it. Meanwhile, Nick visits a jewel store to buy her a pendant similar to the one he broke. There, he gets a surprise visit from the idol from the show's beginning, and they both sit under a fountain to catch up with each other. She advises Nick to try and understand Curran's feelings instead of giving her a new pendant, and he finds her buying food from a local stall. There, he notices Curran's cheerful side and decides to spend some time with her to understand her better. Curran tells him he shouldn't worry about the broken pendant and that she is much better off without it. At night, they are greeted by other adventurers, and it turns out that they are making a name for themselves in the community. Despite going through the worst, Curran and the rest feel at home with each other. As they enjoy themselves, the receptionist at their motel arrives and asks them to come with her. Back at the motel, the landlord appoints them the job of trawling the labyrinth of bonds and bringing her the sword of bonds from it. She says that if they cannot locate the sword, she will pay them 30,000 dinar per excursion. Nick becomes skeptical and demands that the landlady draws out the map and lists every type of monster they might encounter. He further says that he needs guaranteed payment, even in case the sword is in bad shape, and asks her to write it down for legal reasons. Later, in the dungeon, it is revealed that the Sword of Bonds enhances the abilities of party members based on the strength of their bond. While moving through a hallway, they notice the lights automatically turn on and off as they move, meaning that this labyrinth once had an advanced civilization. Nick asks them to keep an eye out for hidden passages while a secret camera spies on them. They walk down the stairs and come across a closed alley with a green lamp at the end of it. Zem reads the instructions to reveal that the lamps indicate dead ends of the dungeon, but Nick says that those lamps were meant to be read. As Nick walks into the alley, a hidden passage opens, leading to a dark room filled with dozens of containers. Tiana uses her detection magic just to be safe and finds no traces of magic or other life forms inside the room. However, she suspects someone is purposely blocking the trails and there might be danger ahead. As they approach a red glow across the room, all the lights turn on and a voice starts addressing them. The voice is coming out of a broken magic weapon that lies next to them on a pedestal, but they ignore it and discuss the nature of the weapon. The weapon, in response, says it is the sword of bond that they seek and claims to be the finest piece of terrain magic armory. The sword asks them to equip it, but they refuse and tell it they only sought it out for money. The sword says it doesn't want to be stored in some warehouse as it has been waiting for a worthy wielder for years after being deceived by some guild members. It says that some guild members locked it in here and told it that someone worthy would find it someday, but they never had any intentions of letting anyone have it. Nick picks up the sword and tells it he has some bills to pay, but touching it engages a protection system in the room. Just then, an explosion occurs, and the sword tells them that they won't be able to leave without defeating its guardian, the Amalgam Golem. As it appears, Tiana uses her ice shards against it, while Curran charges it head-on. However, it reflects the fragments onto Curran and injures her badly. As Zem heals Curran, Nick takes the golem head-on and asks the others to retreat to the exit. His dagger slashes do not affect the golem, but he continues to grab its attention so his party members can escape. The sword asks Nick to use it as a weapon since it is the only way to harm the golem, and says he can do whatever he wants with it after he defeats the monster. Meanwhile, the exit is shut, and the group is unable to leave when they notice Nick yielding the sword. The sword asks Nick to envision Curran in his mind and yell out the word Union if he wants to access its full potential. Nick abides yet fails to unlock the sword's full strength. The golem attacks him and tosses him into the hole it came out of. Tiana uses her ice magic to freeze the golem and sends Curran to rescue Nick. Just then, the golem breaks free, so Zem and Tiana work together to buy time for the rest. Meanwhile, Nick is knocked under rubble when Curran finds him, but he tells her to leave him and run with the rest. Curran refuses and continues to remove the debris on top of Nick. Seeing her refusing to give up on him, he apologizes for breaking her pendant and says that he knows it was important to her. Curran says she kept the pendant because she couldn't accept the truth that she was tricked and left to die. She hoped that one day Kalios would return and she would go on adventures with him like she used to. But when the pendant broke that day, she realized there's so much more to this world than Kalios, and it all happened because of Nick. Just then, the sword starts to glow and it asks Nick to say the word again. Back above, Tiana runs out of magic and the golem continues to approach them. As they fear for their lives, a bright glow appears and they see the golem splatter across the room. The glow came from Nick, who has merged bodies with Curran and is yielding the sword along with a fancy looking armor on his body. Nick finishes the golem in one strike but falls and gets separated from Curran from exhaustion. They return to the motel and demonstrate the sword to the landlady, who is not impressed with its abilities, but pays them the agreed amount anyways. Just then, she notices a white-haired kid standing across the room who introduces herself as Kizuna, and her name means the enduring bonds between people. It turns out she is the person who was locked inside the sword and is now part of their party. Back at their motel, they collect the money they got from the job and teach Kizuna the 3 rules of their party. As Zem and Nick leave to spend the money on their hobbies, Tiana asks Kizuna to accompany her to the race. As Kizuna gets accustomed with the outside world, she notices a handful of details of people that she was deprived of for hundreds of years. Kizuna sees Tiana holding a lighter and comments that she sees a history attached to it. She also craves compliments and annoys the entire group to obtain them. Just then, Nick provides the group with a small chest, a key infused with magic, and an abacus to count and keep their money safe. He hands them 230 Dina and says that this is all the wealth they collectively have right now. In a flashback, it's Tiana's last day at her magic school, and her teacher gives her a lighter as a parting gift, which she holds dearly to this day. Tiana regrets how she ruined her teacher's career because he got caught up in a scandal with her. Yet his kindness, despite losing his title as a sage, left a mark on her. He says that it is strange how they are able to smile despite all they went through, and states that perhaps the worst is yet to come. He bursts into uncontrollable laughter and states that he cannot help himself when there is a deafening silence. As she leaves him laughing, Tiana wonders if she can do anything to help his teacher in any way. He turns around and says that he has one last lesson left for her, which is that no one has the power to decide who you are except for you. He tells Tiana to always remember this lesson, and with that, he turns around and starts laughing again. In the present, Tiana wakes up every day in bed, hoping that everything will go back to normal, and she hopes to be surrounded by pillows and fluffy blankets like she used to. She says that everyone in her group feels the same way, that they wish they could go back in time to when everything was okay. We all have a wish that even the most powerful magic wouldn't grant, and every day we wake up miserable because of it. Meanwhile, Nick wakes up from a nightmare about his ex-girlfriend Claudine and wonders if it was Kizuna who used some telepathy to send these thoughts into his brain. He wonders if it's just him or if other members are also having a tough time. In the morning, they notice Kizuna being cheerful and wish they could be so carefree like her. Later, while exploring a dungeon, they come across a Resetsu ogre, and Nick tells the rest that it's different than the one they faced before. Oh, and by the way, Kizuna has given them the ability to communicate through telepathy, so they can do that now. Just then, Kizuna recklessly marches in on the ogre and blocks its attack easily. He launches a magic orb at her, which she deflects and uses one of her abilities to make a copy of herself. With that, she single-handedly defeats the ogre and states that she can make up to 5 copies of herself. However, the clones use the stamina of her fellow party members, which makes them tired. Nick compliments her skills, to which she responds that she absorbed the sword skills of a swordsman who previously wielded her. Later, they walk to a restaurant, which is the same place where Claudine broke up with Nick. Inside, he sees her doing the same thing for a different guy, which is to take a gift from a guy and break up. She says she has to return to her hometown to care for her dying mother, but doesn't have the money to do so. She starts sobbing to manipulate the poor kid into giving money, but Nick interferes and ruins her plan. He jokes about how Claudine has multiple birthdays in a year, and the kid asks her who this man is. Not wanting to face her past, she tries to run off from the cafe, but Nick stops her by asking if she plans to live her life with bounties on her head. Frustrated, she throws the gift at Nick and leaves the restaurant. Later, while Nick explains different types of dungeons to the group, Claudine sneaks behind and pours juice on his head. Her bodyguard Leon tries to threaten him, but he mocks him instead, and they both take their brawl outside. In the back alley, Nick prepares to fight Leon, but he apologizes and says that he underestimated his capabilities. He says that he has heard a lot about Nick and that he can have his way with Claudine since she has made a lot of enemies around here. Leon states that she was a good source of money, but now it is time to dump her and it's too dangerous to be with her. He thinks Nick is doing the same with his party members and asks him to join his group when he runs away with their money but receives a punch to his face from Nick. He tries to counter Nick, but he manages to restrain him easily. Nick says he needs the money too, but it holds no value if it comes at the cost of betraying his friends. Just then, he gets ambushed by another one of the Tiger's party members, but the rest join in immediately before it gets out of hand. The landlady asks them to settle their conflict with rules, and Leon challenges Nick to a battle of mathematics bare knuckle. I have no idea what kind of battle that is, and nor does anyone else. The landlady explains the game's rules, which contains 10 rounds of maths and brawling simultaneously. A round goes on until one side solves a math problem, so if they fail to solve it, the brawl goes on forever. Each problem will be harder than the previous one, and if you have a 10-point lead, you will get a free punch at the opponent. They draw names to determine who will solve math problems, and unfortunately for the survivors, they draw Curran while the other team draws Claudine. Later, the survivors evaluate Curran's math ability, but she fails to answer correctly to even the simplest problems. Seeing her disappointed in her abilities, Zem politely tells her he will help her improve. Kizuna asks them to let her battle, but Zem tells her that she is too strong and it won't be a fair fight, but tells her that she is part of their group, which cheers her on. They spend a new few days teaching Curran maths, while Zem spends time with the ladies to gather information about their rivals. The night before the battle, the survivors gather around and discuss their plans for tomorrow. Their opponents were acting confident, meaning that they have experienced it before and have some kind of trick up their sleeves. Zem recalls how one of the ladies told him that Leon cheats during the game, but she isn't exactly sure how he does so. The group figures their opponents use some sort of telepathy crystals to share information during their battles and advise Curran to keep doing what she learned until they signal her. Meanwhile, Claudine shares the tale of her childhood when her parents got fired from their jobs because they stole money. They were about to sell her off, but she ran away from the house and had to somehow make a living in the world. She had the looks which helped her become the fraud she is now, and it was all working fine until she met Nick, who later became a thorn in her side. She wakes up from a nightmare and promises to take revenge on Nick for ruining her life. Meanwhile, the battle begins and Curran and Claudine are presented with simple math problems for the first round. On the other hand, Nick tries to bait Leon into attacking him, but he continues to step back and dodge. Curran finishes the problems first, and the fighting is paused to evaluate the scores. Curran scores 86 points, while Claudine scores 98, which gives Leon a free hit on Nick. She apologizes to Nick, who tells her not to worry, as a mere pat from a kitten won't hurt him. However, Leon strikes him in the belly instead of his face, and Nick figures out that the math part can be used as an offensive tool as well as a defensive tactic. The person with the pen can solve math problems quickly, giving them free hits in the brawl round, so the person fighting does not have to engage during rounds at all. At the end of the second round, the score is 98 to 79 in favor of Team Claudine, and Leon gets a free hit again. Curran feels disappointed in herself and says it is her fault that Nick is getting beaten up, but he cheers her on by saying that he expected to get hit dozens of times, but he only has been hit twice. In addition, Curran started by getting 80% of the questions wrong, but now she's doing much better than she could have imagined. He compliments her efforts and cheers her on, and she gets excited to do something she couldn't do before. Round 3 starts and Curran focuses entirely on the math problems, ignoring all of Claudine's trash talk. Meanwhile, Nick is getting tired from constantly being on the offensive, while Leon is waiting for the problems to get harder so he can cheat and win. Tiana uses mage skills to detect traces of the telepathic magic but cannot find any, making her wonder if they had the wrong idea all along. As the round ends, Tiana proposes that they stop wasting people's time and simultaneously present all the remaining problems. Nick agrees and says he has the strength to take all the penalty punches at once. Meanwhile, Leon cannot understand what they are planning, as it is clear Nick doesn't have much left in him. The final round begins, and Claudine knows she cannot solve these problems alone. She gets surprised to see Curran solving the problems at rapid speeds, but figures she is bluffing since she scored less on the much easier problems. She uses telepathy to talk to their member, Beg, who is sitting somewhere discreet with a calculator. As he telepaths the answer to her, Tiana uses her magic detection to locate him. Just then, Nick notices the survivors leave the arena, and Leon wonders why they left after changing the rules. He realizes it is all a trap and asks Claudine to stop writing, but she refuses to listen. The survivors locate Beg and return to the arena with him. The landlady figures they were using thought stones to communicate and cheat, and orders her men to arrest them. Later at night, they all gather in a cafe and compliment Curran for her hard work. As they end the day on a happy note, we see someone run past the nearby roof in a rush. And with that, the recap comes to an end. What does the future hold for survivors? Let's find out in the next episode. And for now, please leave us a like and subscribe to Annie Recap for more content like this on your feed. Peace!